We had technical difficulties. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Hogmolly Hustle. Before we get started, I want to say if you start listening to this and you like what you're hearing, make sure you like and subscribe to make sure you can keep up with all of the junk that we say. And if you agree with or disagree with anything we say, make sure you leave a comment in the comment section, wherever it may be. Also, we got a lot of big games to talk about, got a lot of big news, got a lot of scandalous news to talk about this week. So we'll see what all we can get to within our time frame here. But before we get into a lot of the games and the recaps and all the big news, for better or worse, let's talk about some injuries.
Yeah, so big week on the injury front. Not what you like to hear as a fan, but kind of started with Quentin Nelson going to IR with a high ankle sprain. Hate to hear that. He's one of the best offensive linemen in my eyes in the NFL. On top of that, you've got Hogmolly Frank Ragnow to IR for the Lions. He'll miss at least 3 weeks with turf toe. So it's a nagging injury there. You got Washington tight end Logan Thomas. I believe that's Logan Thomas that used to be quarterback at VT. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so athlete Logan Thomas to IR with a hamstring injury. David Montgomery for the Bears has good news. There's no ACL tear there, just a sprained knee, but he's still expected to miss a little bit over a month. And then for your Packers, Jair Alexander is supposed to miss significant time with a shoulder injury. We got Teddy Bridgewater with a concussion. He's week to week. And good news on the injury front. Christian McCaffrey was back at Panthers practice today, testing out his hamstring. Matt Rule said in their press conference that things look good there, so they're hopeful that he'll be able to come back either this week or next week. So that's kind of the big injury news.
Yeah, well, that's things are looking good for Panthers fans. We'll get to that here in a minute. But did you see the Maryland guy get his leg bent up into a pretzel shape when they were playing their game?
I wish that I hadn't.
Oh gosh, that was ugly. I mean, he just took a step in the turf and he just starts bending like a.
It kind of reminded me of the Kevin Ware injury at Louisville. I think it was the 2012 or 2013 NCAA tournament where his leg just snapped like a dry piece of spaghetti. It was brutal to watch.
Yeah, it was. I don't know the extent of that injury. I know that it looked nasty, but hopefully it's a situation where it's not as bad. I haven't looked up to see what the update is on that one. And you saw the Stanford guy get his foot turned around. Do you see that one?
I did not see that one. No,
that was awful. In the Stanford game, he goes across the middle, gets tackled, his foot turns around like 260 degrees. It's like turning completely the wrong direction.
Oh, gosh.
And the worst part was the camera stuck on – it was just looking at his foot for about 2 minutes. It didn't go away. And they're just sitting there, and there's one camera stuck on the dude's foot. And I'm like, turn away from it. Goodness, great. Usually they're pretty good at getting away from it. But I was like, what are you doing? Like, it's just, out of respect, if nothing else, just take it away from the kid, But no, it was,
you hate to see
it was awful. Like, I mean, oof, I hate seeing injuries like that. I was fortunate never to have any injury like that when I played. Man, it's tough to watch because it's just like that, and the season changes for certain players.
Well, I mean, it's really rough now because every injury is instantly uploaded to social media the second it happens, and then you can share it. I mean, anytime someone snaps their leg, it's all over social media, all over Twitter. So it's like you can't escape those gruesome injuries. They're going to find you somehow.
No, it's crazy. It's like I remember when the UNC basketball player, I forget what his name is, he broke his leg really ugly. It was like one of the tournaments on the sideline. He came down and just snapped his leg in a real ugly way. I think it was a UNC player.
I'm not sure. We've had a couple of bad injuries in the past, so it's probably just slipping my mind. But
it was an ugly one. I remember I had to go jump through hurdles to find that because it was still in the age of, Neanderthals and no social media blowing up the way it does now. That was kind of crazy. All right. Well,
Speaking of
what?
social media, though, pretty interesting tweets coming out of Jacksonville this week.
Yeah. There's a whole lot of interesting news coming out of Jacksonville this week. I try to stay impartial and unbiased, but Urban Meyer's a scumbag. Can we just go out and say that? I mean, you don't have to agree with it, but that's how I feel. I'll go out on a limb and say he's a scumbag.
I've never met him in person, but from the outside looking in, he doesn't look like someone that I would want my son to model themselves after, if that makes sense. Potential son, fictitious son. I'm not a dad.
Yeah. I wouldn't want my fictitious daughter to meet him either. But all that video and the inappropriate touching, the way he treats his wife with all of this, doing all of this, knowing that his wife is going through all the trouble, and I know people were talking about, you kind of feel bad for him because he's so passionate. This is before all the videos started releasing about how heartbroken he is and stuff like that. Maybe anxiety hits with heart conditions, and maybe all that wasn't just a excuse in the past, and that could be the case. And he may have some serious anxiety, which mental issues are very serious, but inexcusable actions in that bar. And
well, from a football standpoint, right? Your team's 0-4 now after the loss to Cincinnati. Trevor Lawrence, the number 1 overall pick in the draft, doesn't have the help that he needs. In a way, the game plan has hindered him some in the fact that they don't provide appropriate protection in certain sets. And so as a Jaguars fan, that's not really what you want to see when you think about trying to turn the program around, get some wins, get some substance rolling, and get Trevor back on the right track. That's not the type of headline you want to wake up to.
No, and even though he's had a rough rookie year, I do think that Trevor Lawrence has shown promise. There were a couple throws against the Bengals. He dropped one in the end zone that was beautiful. I mean, it went perfect drop right in the bucket, right for the receiver. It was a beautiful throw. Now, I don't know if that was caught or dropped, but I just remember seeing that throw. I was like, golly, that's beautiful. And yeah, he's made some mistakes. Everybody's made mistakes. These rookies have. But that's to be expected. And I think that as time goes on, he's going to turn it around. People are saying he's a bust. It's like, come on, shut up. So
you can't say that 4 weeks into a kid's career.
Yeah. People just like to jump on people when things are going bad. And most of the time, it's not necessary. For Urban Meyer, I don't care if anybody jumps on it while everything's going bad. That's the bet he made. So we'll see what happens. I will say this. There's one of the funniest videos I've ever seen was when Urban Meyer, I don't know if he was just talking about a college football game or if it was like when he first got the Jaguars job. I remember there was a conversation with him on a boat. And you see in the mirror in the boat, there's a guy in front of him that is a shirtless bro that is just walking around. There's some old dude, and you can hear in the background, which is that's not a very good impersonation of a bong, but it sounds like a bong rip in the background. Anyway,
like the bubbling.
I don't know what they sound like, so I can't really make a good impression of what they sound like. But you can tell it's a bong rip. And then anyway, you see the guy kind of stand up, look around. Then he starts walking in the mirror. You see him get closer to Urban. Urban's in mid-interview, and you see him go, no. And look back down. He's trying to say, no. I thought that was just one of the funniest things. And I couldn't stop thinking about that whenever he got the job. And as things started getting closer and closer, I'm like, it's just not going to work out. I didn't think it was going to get to this point. And it's a real ugly situation. I hate it for Jaguars fans because this is not what you want. Maybe Jaguars fans didn't think this was going to turn out well. The college college coach coming to the NFL. But I don't think anybody expected this to turn out the way it has.
Yeah, not this bad. I didn't think it would be this bad.
No. Well, now that we've talked about some bad news, let's go ahead and talk about some good news. Because, ding, 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 Christmas came early for a couple of teams here. on the backs of some teams losing some of their better players. Jalen Smith, cut by the Cowboys, and I got a text message from a close friend of ours complaining pretty heavily about the Cowboys cutting Jalen Smith out of nowhere. And then he ends up signing with the Packers today. And I put in our little schedule, I said, hey, we're going to talk about where they might go. We had a whole segment planned where we're going to talk about where Jalen Smith or where Stephon Gilmore might go. And now they both signed. We'll get to Stephon Gilmore in a second. I'll let you take away with that. But first, talk about Jalen Smith. The Packers picked him up. I don't know if he'll end up playing right away. It depends if, how those things go. Sometimes they don't come in and play right away. Sometimes they play limited snaps. But I do like the idea of bringing in Jalen Smith as long as he plays better than he has been playing for the Cowboys. As he can get back to that all-pro or that Pro Bowl level linebacker. That's something that the Packers haven't had. They've been bouncing around different linebackers, and they haven't been able to get a consistent inside linebacker presence. I think it could be very good for the Packers and be a very good pickup for them. And maybe Jalen Smith feels upset that he wasted hundreds of thousands of dollars changing his number to 9 this offseason, only to be cut by the Cowboys. So now he's in Green Bay, and hopefully he's pissed off, Hopefully he's upset, and he's ready to rebuild his image in Green Bay. What do you think about that?
Yeah, for sure. I was shocked when I heard the news that he had been released. But looking back at that game against Carolina, it kind of makes sense to me. I don't remember seeing Jalen Smith on the field near as much as I expected to. I think that part of that is that they're kind of shifting their linebacking core from the traditional sense of having Smith and Van Der Esch out there to all of a sudden moving Micah Parsons all over the place. He was lined up with his hand down on the line of scrimmage sometimes. It's like a 5 technique. You got him lined up as the will at times. Walked up as with itchy feet, almost like a blitzing safety at times. So the versatility of Micah Parsons really, I think that's what, at the end of the day, kind of caused this ripple between Jalen Smith and the Cowboys. I think that he's probably pretty upset that he's getting less snaps and he's not on the field as much, especially in certain situations. So I guess they're going to more of a hybrid defense with guys like Jabril Cox and Keanu Neal getting more playing time there. And obviously Micah Parsons as well, who really impressed me in that game against Carolina.
Yeah. Well, I think that we talked about this in the first week when Tampa Bay and the Cowboys played. I talked about how I thought the defense looked messy, and part of it was because they were shifting so many guys in and out. They had a lot of different linebackers switching in. I thought, man, this just looks messy. Maybe they'll get it figured out. I had Keanu Neal, Jabril Cox, Jalen Smith, Leighton Vander Esch, Micah Parsons flipping around. I thought, something's got to give. Somebody has to play in the back seat here. It's not going to be Jalen Smith because he's a guy that just got paid. Leighton Vander Esch is a question because they didn't pick up his option in the offseason, which made me think that if there was going to be somebody that was going on the outs, it was going to be him. But now Jalen Smith is out, so you got to think, well, I guess Leighton Vander Esch is going to be picked back up or something else is going to happen with him. The 3-4-4-3 set up with Dan Quinn and the old, let me get this right, Seattle likes to run a 3-4 defense with 4-3 personnel or 4-3 defense with 3-4 personnel, one of the two. That's their whole thing. And any of the defensive guys that have left that, they try to do a similar deal. And I think it can work in Dallas. I do think that something had to give at linebacker. It's very frustrating as a Micah Parsons fantasy owner to see what they're doing because you have no idea what to expect. Is he going to be rushing the passer the whole time, in which case he may not get enough stats? Is he going to be dropping back? How's he going to be playing? Very frustrating. But it is interesting developments in the Dallas Cowboys defensive saga this year. And I don't think it's concluded. I don't think the saga is concluded. It's going to be interesting to see how the defense looks without Jalen Smith. Do they look better? Do they look worse? It's going to be interesting to watch how that develops.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that It kind of surprised me that that Green Bay was the team that went out and got him. I didn't think that linebacker was necessarily their biggest need, as we'll kind of talk about further on down the podcast. But I think that definitely helps their defense, especially when stopping the run in a division where when Montgomery's healthy, Chicago likes to run the ball, and Detroit has DeAndre Swift, Minnesota Dalvin Cook. So as an open field tackler, I think that Jalen Smith can definitely provide a little spark to that defense.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to see the Packers go out and pick somebody up. If this truly is the last dance, that's why I expected them to go after Stephon Gilmore. But, of course, they did not. But the Panthers, Fitterer, made another big move here and got Stephon Gilmore. I'll let you take it away. This is Christmas Day for you, Stephon Gilmore to the Panthers, shortly after getting C.J. Henderson for a good deal. J.C. Horn is hurt, of course, but Stephon Gilmore, who is expected to be ready to play around week 6, week 7. Take it away.
Yeah, so this kind of goes back to when the Panthers hired Fitterer back in the spring. He was saying that we would be in on every deal. And at the time, a lot of people were speculating that meant Deshaun Watson sweepstakes and that sort of thing. And it might still come back to fruition eventually. But for now, he is willing and dealing mid-season. He was making more trades than any other GM during the draft. And so it's an exciting time to be a Panthers fan. I think I saw somebody tweet and said something like the Panthers made a total of 11 trades the past 2 or 3 years, and they've made like 13 the past calendar year. And so definitely a change of culture there. As far as the trade goes, I think that the value of a 6th-round pick in 2023 for, I guess, 7-8 weeks of Gilmore that's promised in his contract and owing him around $5 million. I think that's definitely something that I'm willing to part with to help this team win right now. And so I love what Fitterer's doing for the Panthers. I think that this is going to be something that will help us get through the injury to J.C. Horn this past week against Dallas. We look kind of disconjointed at times, trying to defend against that Cowboys passing attack with all the weapons, CeeDee Lamb, Mari Cooper, the tight ends they have, Zeke. And so having Dante Jackson and Stephon Gilmore playing opposite sides of each other, having A.J. Bouye in the nickel, and hopefully we get Shaq Thompson back from his foot injury either this week or next week. You start to like the way that defense looks. You start to like the way the defense is starting to take shape. And it'll be interesting to see what we do at the end of the season because Dante Jackson and Stephon Gilmore's contracts expire. So I think that this is going to be a scenario where we'll probably want to re-sign Dante Jackson. And if the price tag is too much, we'll let Gilmore walk. I think that's what we'll do long term. But I mean, a 6th-round pick, even if we only have Gilmore through the rest of the season, I think is definitely a win for Carolina.
And I'm not savvy on the exact details of compensatory picks and how that applies to players that are acquired mid-season. But that is a possibility. I have to look that up because I really don't know the specifics on compensatory picks when somebody's traded for in the middle of the season. But that's something to look at. That Dante Jackson is definitely the one you'd like to keep later on. But it's definitely an interesting situation. We'll talk more about the Panthers in more detail next week. We have another deep dive for the Southern Divisions planned for next week. But as for the Stephon Gilmore thing, I think it's a great pickup. I think that even if J.C. Horn is out for potentially the whole season, which may very well be the case, hopefully it's not the case, while he's sitting there watching, I think it's great for him to watch someone like Stephon Gilmore and learn from him. Because if you're going to talk about some bump man coverage, that's a good guy to learn from. I think that can also help somebody like C.J. Henderson. I think that if nothing else, just playing alongside someone like Stephon Gilmore is going to help all these defensive backs. And I'll save the rest of what I got for next week because I do have some more thoughts on this Panthers defense and how things might turn out. But
I will say, before we move on, I do love this from the fact that now we don't have to rush C.J. Henderson and kind of just throw him out there and see what he can do. We can prepare him and give him the adequate time to learn our scheme and build that chemistry with the other members of the secondary. There were a couple of plays in Dallas where he looked kind of confused, and I don't think that's because he's a bad player. I think it's just because, he hopped on a flight and moved to Carolina in under a week's time, and then all of a sudden he's playing for a completely different team. And that's a lot to take in, and we don't have to rush C.J. Henderson along, and we also don't have to rush J.C. Horn back from injury, because I think that everybody in Carolina would agree that we would much rather have the long-term health of J.C. Horn good to go for him to come back next season than feel like we have to rush him back for a playoff push this year and then risk further injuring him.
Yeah, it is interesting to see the Panthers stock up on their South Carolina corners, and it's good to see Stephon Gilmore back in the Carolinas. So we'll see how this works out. I hope it's not a deflating outcome. I really want this to work out and really add to this defense. But I still regret not being able to see Jair Alexander and Stephon Gilmore in the same secondary. That would have been really nice for the last dance. Well,
that's what surprised me. I thought that our teams would have went after the opposite player. Like, I feel like Carolina never really replaced Luke Kuechly when he retired, and I feel like with the Jair Alexander injury, right, it would make all the sense in the world for the Packers to swoop in and get Gilmore.
Yeah.
So that's what surprised me. But
well, can I talk about how good Shaq Thompson? I did not have a very high set of beliefs for the abilities that Shaq Thompson had, but he is playing really well this season, and it's impressing me a lot because I've seen him, rotate in with Thomas Davis, Luke Kuechly over time, and just never really saw it as that tweener linebacker as he develops more into a, stand-up linebacker into that role, and he's playing really well.
Yeah, he's really surpassed my expectation, and I will say that this week against Dallas, he kind of fell back into some old habits and started missing some tackles, and during the game, I kind of assumed that something wasn't right. And so that's that foot injury, and that's what Matt Rule hinted at in his press conference. So, hopefully he gets healed up, because I think that he's improved a lot as a tackler, right? He played safety and linebacker both, and some running back in college at Washington. And so he was just kind of a hybrid guy that could move around, almost like a Jeremy Chin type early on in his career. Great in coverage, but not really the type of linebacker that you can count on to make those tackles. But that's what he's turned into this year, so it's good to have him.
Yeah, it has some similarities to Miles Jack as well. Well, our producer is yelling at me to move on. We've spent too much time on this, got to move on. Let's talk about some of the games. If you have one in your mind from this past week that we've just went through that stands out to you, feel free to bring it up. I was going to talk about mine, but you can talk about yours first if you want to. I mean, that's fine. You can interrupt me.
I've been waiting 3 days to do this, and I think if I wait any longer, then I might explode. So if I can just hit on this right quick. Did you watch the Sunday night game, New England and Tampa?
Yes.
Brady's return. So maybe this is just me being stupid. Maybe this is just an overreaction on my part. I felt like both of those coaches made massive mistakes in that fourth quarter of that game. For example, when Tampa has the ball and they're attempting to lock up the end of the game with 2 minutes left, and it's 2nd and 8. Tampa has the ball. This is Tom's moment to just drain the clock and then kick a field goal or punch it in. either way, not give the Patriots another opportunity. And on 2nd and 8, he throws a deep ball like 40 yards downfield to Antonio Brown to try to get the home run and score a touchdown. And so,
was that the one that was like within his arm reach and Antonio just didn't pull it in? That one,
and he didn't pull it in, and then so I was like, okay, well that didn't really make sense. Now you're set up 3rd and 8, but I mean, if you pick up 6-7 yards here and keep the clock running, then that might be okay. I probably would have wanted to drain the clock and try to get some sort of short completion or maybe run the ball, keep the clock moving, that sort of thing. Weird flex, but okay. And then I believe they called a timeout at that point. It was a dead ball anyways. So anyways, they come back out there and they do the same exact play again. The same exact play. Antonio Brown, right side of the hash, go long, Brady, overthrown, out of bounds, clock doesn't tick. So then it's all of a sudden it's 4th and 8 after 2 failed attempts at the end zone. And I was just thinking to myself, like, that is, if New England comes back and wins this game because they have 2 minutes left on the clock and all they need is I believe at that point all they needed was a field goal. Like, what are you doing, Bruce Arians? What are you doing, Tom Brady? Like that, it just didn't make sense to me. And so New England gets the ball back. Mac's trying to piece together the first big moment in his career, this Sunday Night Football game, comeback against Brady. And then Belichick decides to kick it in the monsoon in Foxborough, 55 yards, something like that, without trying to draw the other team off sides. The play call on that drive was lacking. So I feel like McDaniels doesn't really trust Mac Jones to throw the ball downfield at all. And so it really shows up in their play call. And just some of the incompetency in that fourth quarter just drove me crazy. And so I had to get that off my chest. I do not understand the decision to throw 2 deep balls back to back and just give Mac Jones an opportunity. So I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I'd agree with you about some of the play calls on the Tampa Bay side and some on the New England side as well. Didn't really make a lot of sense. I would say in general, you look at Mac Jones, I don't know how you could be more impressed with Mac Jones at this point. There are very few situations in sport, in the NFL, in football, more stressful than a legend, a GOAT, coming back to the home that he built the stadium, essentially, or had a big hand in building the stadium. You're the new guy. He comes to town. They're all cheering for him at the beginning. They start booing him afterwards. It's an electric, weird atmosphere. Even Tom Brady, you could tell, was kind of nervous. Not in a way that he was playing poorly, but you could just tell it was a different game. He said it was a different game. And you have all this talk around. Everything's been built up to this point. Mac Jones has been nothing but, crapped on all through the process. Everybody, it's Mac Jones. They all talk about him going to the Niners. Everybody's just been hating on Mac Jones from the very get-go. Now he has to play against Tom Brady in this big return-to-home game. Crazy atmosphere. And he plays a pretty solid game. And, yeah, McDaniels doesn't let him throw downfield. I think more of that is just not wanting to ruin the confidence of your young quarterback. You want to keep him get him in rhythm and and then start opening it up as the season goes on. You can't give him the whole playbook yet, even though they say he's really smart and he could open up the playbook and do a lot more. But they want to make sure that he gets things down. And in a monsoon, you don't want to be throwing it too deep, especially in that situation against a good defense, a good defensive coordinator. And boy, that kick almost went through. And I wish it would have, not because I necessarily want the Patriots to win, but I would have loved to have seen just the legendary performance with like 50 seconds left. Tom Brady in Foxborough, going down the field to inevitably get, if nothing else, a field goal and win the game instead of winning the way they did and missing a field goal. That was cool, but man, like it would have been like a movie. He gets one last game-winning drive in Foxborough to shut him out. Gosh, that would have been crazy. And then the 20-minute conversation that he and Belichick apparently had. I hope there's some closure on whatever was going on between them. I'm sure there has been. Nobody really knows how they feel about each other. But it was,
what I would give to be a fly on the wall for that conversation and just see the dialogue that took place. Like, no one knows except for those two guys.
Yeah. If there is any 30 for 30 film that I'm looking forward to, it's Brady Belichick, the whole story. Because you know it's going to come out. And maybe the details come out before that happens. But it's a really weird situation, the whole thing. I thought the game was really good. I thought it was really cool to see all the players that Tom Brady had played with come up to and talk to him. I believe he said something like, keep your head up to Mac Jones at the end, which is pretty cool to see. Mac Jones looked disappointed, but he played well. I was very impressed with Mac Jones, and I don't know if he's the guy to replace Brady. I don't know if he's a franchise quarterback yet. It's way too early for that. You can't call anybody a bust, and you can't call anybody a franchise player yet. But, man, that was a fun game. And I felt like I was one of the only people that said the Patriots had a chance. I was watching all the experts. I was talking to all my friends, and everybody was like, I don't think it's going to be much of a game. The Buccaneers are going to run away with it. I'm like, why? Why are we just counting out one of the best defensive coaches of all time and a pretty solid team that's getting a lot of players back? I don't know why we're just counting them out, especially when the Buccaneers haven't looked their best this year. So I
couldn't believe that fans were booing when Brady ran out on the field.
Well,
I can't imagine that.
Well, they started out by cheering, right? They started out with the Tom Brady cheers before. I think that they did it the right way, I believe, that at the beginning they were cheering, showing their appreciation, loving on Tom before the game started. Once the game starts, he's the enemy. A similar situation happened in Green Bay when Brett Favre came back as a Minnesota Viking. Everybody cheering him on, but as soon as the game turns on, they're going at him. See, I don't mind that. I don't think it's disrespectful. I think that's what you can expect out of the game. You can't have them just cheering him on the whole time, no matter what he did. But before the game, show all the love. After the game, show all the love. But during the game, they're the person you're going against. So I don't have a problem with that myself.
In the beginning, not everyone was cheering, and that's what bothers me. If Cam Newton had won 6 Super Bowls for the Panthers and had taken the Panthers to the NFC Championship game literally every other year of his career, what are you doing? How can you hate the guy? If you're mad at anyone, be mad at Belichick and Kraft and Brady, just the whole group for letting it blow up in their eyes, like in front of their own faces. Like, I just can't fathom booing a guy that got me 6 rings, but that's just me.
Well, I can't speak for everybody that was there. I wasn't like you. I wasn't in the stadium seeing the individuals that were booing him. I just heard like the chants beforehand. But I don't know. I don't have a problem with them booing him in the game. I did hear the chants before. I didn't hear all that much booing. I'm sure there was booing because there's always that guy out there. But it is an interesting situation, and it's always ugly. See, the worst instance of that was probably when Andrew Luck retired. That was probably one of the worst instances of fans booing. Yeah. That angered me because that was just ridiculous. Because there was no cheering beforehand. There was no showing their love for him. It was as soon as that got released, they're booing him out of the stadium. Like, come on, shut up. Fans can be very fickle, stupid creatures. Yeah, I hate to see that. Well, that was a good amount of time we spent on that. Let's go ahead and move on to another game. This is another game that I was very interested in watching, and I was very impressed with the way it turned out. The Chargers versus the Raiders. We wanted to see who was going to come out on top, and I think the Chargers were pretty dominant. The game was a little bit closer towards the end, but the Chargers played very well early on. There were a lot of good plays on both sides. Derwin James played really well. That was really cool to see. Derwin James is playing out of his mind in that game, and I hope he can stay healthy because it's fun to see him play. He's a great athlete, great defensive back. The Raiders had some good plays. There was one by Hunter Renfrow. It was on a fake punt, I believe, and he's the return man. They do this little fake punt, and as a return man, he comes up and stops the fake punt, tackles the guy short of the down marker. I was like, oh, that's so cool. Like what effort this guy's going to go in there and, one, not give up a touchdown, but two, stop this fake attempt. That's really impressive. And they had a good game from both sides, but Herbert looked really good. He overthrew some balls, but to be expected for a young player of any caliber. But, man, this Chargers team looks pretty solid. And as they can stay healthy, it's going to be interesting. Also, people were talking about Staley. They were asking about his practice routines. Apparently, some of the older players don't practice nearly as much during the week. Like Joey Bosa, they don't practice nearly as much during the week, but they play on game time. And his explanation for that was pretty cool. If you didn't watch that pressure, you should. Anybody that's listening, you should go watch that. It was very interesting to see his mindset and how he talks about a gap and a half responsibilities on defense, eating up those blocks and letting the linebackers work. We're overworking these players, these older players, during the week, and the idea is to keep them healthy for the game. So a little bit like load management in the NBA is an interesting take on this. Of course, the Chargers have had a lot of problems with injuries. I don't think it has to do with that necessarily, but it is an interesting take on the preservation of talent in professional sports.
Yeah, I think for me, takeaways from that game, I think that the Chargers had such a momentum boost from knocking off the Chiefs the week prior. And, having that behind you and knowing that you just beat one of the best teams in the NFL and one of the most loaded offenses in the NFL gave that team the confidence they needed to just go home to LA and come out firing on all cylinders and just bury the Raiders in the first half and then, prevent them from coming back in the second half. The game got interesting there for a while. Derek Carr leading the Raiders downfield to a couple scores, but it was a really solid performance by Justin Herbert. Austin Eckler, it's good to see him healthy, and just a great overall team game. If I'm not mistaken, weren't the Raiders scoreless at halftime?
I believe so. That was They
were, yeah.
They dominated
21-0 at halftime.
Yeah. And they came back and made it a lot closer than it probably should have been. Can we talk about how criminally underrated or underpaid Darren Waller is compared to other tight ends and other offensive pieces out there? I saw somebody put he's the 12th highest paid, I guess it was tight end in the league, which, that's crazy because he's super athletic.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you think about tight ends in the NFL, I feel like most people put Kelsey in a league of his own with Kittle. And then, so that's 1A and 1B. And then after those guys, there's the rest of the league, specifically guys like Mark Andrews, Darren Waller, Greg Olsen before he retired this year.
TJ Hawkinson.
Different guys like that. Hawkinson, right.
Tanyon's jumped up the board a little bit.
Yep. And so you're starting to see the tight end position have a bit of a revolution in the NFL. I mean, we talked about how they're doing the tight end camp convention or whatever they're calling it, tight end union.
The summit.
The summit, okay. And it's becoming a more important part of league offenses, especially when it comes to goal line, because a lot of times you see those tight ends do a delayed release into the end zone, and it's just the easiest touchdown because the defenders think that they're not a threat, and then they just leak out, become an eligible receiver, and it's just an easy 6 points. So it's good to see, honestly. They should get rewarded. They do a lot of dirty work on the line next to the offensive lineman, trying to block these big guys on the end. And so it's good to see them get used more offensively.
I have a little bit of a hot take here. If you can't block, you're half a man. And when it comes to football, there's just something about people that block that just makes them much more manly. Maybe a little bit biased, but it is what it is. A lot of honorary Hogmollys among all those tight ends, especially all those wide tight ends that can also throw a block here and there. Jared Cook's another one that gets brought up a lot as a mid-tier tight end, but he's had a pretty successful career. And
especially how old he is. He's like 37 years old, still getting it done.
Yeah, Herbert found him in this game, and Ruggs is playing really well for the Raiders. People talk about Ruggs as just being a speedster, but he's got some pretty good hands. People don't give him credit for that. And, of course, Hunter Renfrow, he's never going to get the credit that he deserves, but he's going to be in the NFL for a long time. As long as he doesn't lose like a leg or something, he just does everything right. As a special teamer, as a receiver, he just has all those shifty little traits that you like. And he's just a hard-nosed player that's not afraid to go make a tackle, and he just does everything for the team. So, big fan of Hunter Renfrow.
I would like a paternity test to see if Wes Welker is Hunter Renfrow's dad, because I'm telling you that's who he reminds me of. His route running, his hands. It's like Wes Welker reincarnated whenever you watch Hunter Renfrow play.
So after the Combine, I remember looking at this. I don't know why it came up in my mind. But when the Combine happened, they did the hand measurements, and he had happened to be in school that day, and I said, you know what, I got a ruler. I measured my hands. Like, I have had bigger hands than Hunter Renfrow. Like, that's crazy. And you see my hands. I have tiny hands. You know what that is. I was like, that's insane. Wow. He's doing what he's doing with tiny hands. That shows you how much those measurements matter sometimes. But let's see. We got some more to talk about here. We're at the 2/3 mark, so let's go ahead and get through some of these. Another one to talk about briefly is the Rams-Cardinals game. That one did not go the way I thought it would. It was a close game, but the Cardinals are legit. Maybe I discounted the Cardinals. Maybe I didn't think that they could beat this Rams team, but they played really well, and they blocked really well. I have one of my big boy shout-outs is from the Cardinals, and we'll get to that here in a little bit, but the Rams played pretty well against the Cardinals played pretty good against a good Rams team, and vice versa.
Yeah, I thought that would be one of the better games of the week. I thought it would be close up until the last possession. Figured that the last team who got a chance to score would be the team to win. The Cardinals have impressed me a lot. They're the only undefeated team in the NFL right now at 4-0. And, I knew that their offense would deliver. They're one of the more high-octane offenses in the league. Had some questions about that defense. I think after watching them do what they did to Matt Stafford and just kind of rattle him some, I have more confidence in that unit to get the job done moving forward.
Yeah, I think you're definitely going to see these teams. It seems to be the case that you're going to see both of these teams in the playoffs when that time comes, because they are both really good teams, and they're both playing really well with really good quarterbacks leading the way. And good defenses to boot. So there is a lot going on in that division. Of course, we did the deep dive last week of the West Division, so it's definitely very interesting to watch. Also, I thought this in there when we talk about our bigs. Time to go to our big boy shout-outs. My first big boy shout-outs is we're on the talk about the Cardinals and the Rams. DJ Humphries played really well in that Cardinals game. He was running out, leading the way. There was a couple of blocks where he was down 15 yards down the field, lead blocking for Chase Edmonds. There were a lot of these plays where he's pass blocking really well. He's picking up blocks. He's going against Aaron Donald and their other defensive linemen coming in. He's getting spread out, having a real good job. Charlotte native ended up playing at Florida, if I'm not mistaken. DJ Humphries played really well for Arizona last week. Big boy shout out number 1. Second big boy shout out. It happened on an offensive possession, but as a defensive guy playing fullback, which I love. Anytime you get a defensive guy playing a fullback, you got to love that. That's going to be Jalen Carter, defensive lineman for the Georgia Bulldogs. Late in the game, midway late through the game, they end up bringing in big boy Jordan Davis in to block at tight end. And then they have Jalen Carter come in at fullback. He comes in, leads the way. I think he blocks the entire Arkansas defense in the goal line. He just throws these guys around like they're ragdolls. And since we didn't get a chance to talk about it when we recapped the games, we said that Georgia-Arkansas game was going to be pretty close. You got these two big SEC teams coming in. And, boy, it was not close. It just shows you how good this Georgia team is, man. And maybe you could say Arkansas was a fluke. I don't think they're necessarily a fluke. I think they do have a good team, but
just not as good as Georgia.
This Georgia defense is something else, man. It's something else. But those are my two big boy shout-outs. You got to love a big fullback block. But, man, he picked up 3 dudes. It was great. It was one of the coolest things I've seen in quite a while.
Yeah, if you're a listener and you haven't followed us on Twitter, I definitely recommend you do so. I believe I tweeted that highlight and called it a shish kebab block because he literally skewered 3 different Razorbacks and piled them up in the end zone. So if you like that kind of content, go hit us up on Twitter at Hogmolly Hustle. For my big boy shout-outs, I'm going to keep it in the SEC. A lot of big-time SEC programs, obviously. Year in, year out, you've got Georgia, Bama, all these different programs. And then there's a basketball school that dominates the SEC in basketball, but typically isn't much of a threat in football, and that's Kentucky, the Kentucky Wildcats. And so my first big boy shout-out is to Kentucky offensive lineman tackle Darian Canard from the University of Kentucky. He's currently the only collegiate offensive tackle with 85-plus grades in run and pass blocking, according to PFF. So, I mean, he's an anchor on that offensive line. He's a big part as to why they were able to beat Florida and move on, become 5-0 as a football team. And so really impressed with Darian Canard. I'll be interested to see where he goes in the upcoming draft.
Before you move on from Kentucky here, before I forget, because I will forget, have you seen the Kentucky linebacker or defensive end that has 6 fingers?
No.
He legitimately has 1, 2, 3, 4. The 6th one just comes off. It's not like a little tiny finger that you usually see. It's a full-size extra pinky.
You got to put him blocking kicks.
It's insane.
Line him up over the guard on field goal team. I mean,
I guess why it's insane. You got to look
extra pinky, get a finger on the tip of the ball and block that kick, man. That's wild.
It's
the
crazy.
More you know.
It is. The more I saw it, I just ran across that on Twitter. I assume it's real. I looked it up.
Put him at tight end.
It's got to be a pain to buy gloves, right?
Okay. I would say they're probably custom made. He might sew 2 of them together. Well, that's a blessing in disguise. So my second big boy shout out is to 23-year-old defensive lineman, Alabama alum, Quinn Williams of the New York Jets. Now, Caleb, I know you like Quinnen. I think we both kind of enjoyed watching his film when he came out of Alabama. Up until now, really, the highlight of his career was the press conference where he was talking about how cool is it to be on Madden. And he's like, yeah, I play with myself all the time. And he says, wait a second, that sounded weird. That's kind of been the highlight of his career thus far. So this season, he's been playing really well. That Jets defensive line, as we've talked about, has improved as a whole. And so just 23 years old, but he's having a really solid season for them. This week against Tennessee, he had 6 tackles and 2 sacks. And so he played a big role in helping disrupt that Titans offense and lead the Jets to victory. So I'm really proud of Quinn Williams. And he's a guy that he could be in the league for another 10 to 15 years, as big as he is. So good technique, awesome guy to watch.
That Jets defense is very impressive. I used to do mock drafts on my own. I would just sit in front of a camera like this and do mock drafts and talk about players. Nobody watched those either. But one of the guys I was super high on, I have it on video somewhere. I can go find it if nobody believes me. Was Quinn Williams. I said, this guy is going to be the best defensive player in this draft, which was pretty high praise because Nick Bosa was in that draft as well. But I was sticking to it. I love the idea that he was this defensive end for the majority of the time that he was at Alabama early on. And they said, look, if you want to play, get more playing time, we're going to move you inside. So he moves inside, something that he hasn't really done prior to that. Takes him a while to learn. He's so athletic that he just starts dominating early on. But when he gets to the NFL, he has to figure some things out. And now that he's starting to get it, I think you're going to see this whole new level of Quinn Williams, that athleticism, that hand usage. It's always improving. I think that he can end up being a real force in the NFL, and I hope he's hitting a new level here because I think Quinn Williams can be a very, very, very good defensive lineman for a lot of years to come. So I'm glad you brought him up because I do like Quinn Williams. He's just a very likable, smiley guy. I mean, it's just tough to dislike him.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's a big teddy bear.
Yeah. So that gets our shout-outs. So, again, big guys, love to see him make plays like that. Hopefully you keep making plays. And if you're out there and you're making a play, we'll find you. And it's all a matter of time until people find us. So eventually you'll be getting props from us and you'll hear about it. So now we've got some big games coming up in Week 5. We're going to talk about some college games, some NFL games. There's a lot to look at. And we couldn't get to all of the NFL games because there's about 5 that are really good games. But we got a couple of good college games. If I miss anything, you can fill me in like you normally do. But Iowa, Penn State, that's a big game. That's a big game for the Big Ten. Big 12? What are they now? Are they
Big Ten.
Big Ten.
Even though they don't technically have 10 members, but they're called the Big Ten.
Yeah, well, gotta love college conferences. Anyway, that's big because of course you have Ohio State, who like I said, they're out. They're out. They're done. But if something cataclysmic happens with the other teams, they could still technically make it into the Final Four. Iowa, Penn State, these are both teams that I think are better than Ohio State this year. Penn State plays Ohio State very soon, and that's a big game for them. I think that is one that they could end up losing. But Iowa, Penn State, big game. Don't know what exactly is going to happen. Iowa looks really good, but they have had years in the past where Iowa has been really good and everybody gets really high on them, and then something falls apart, and then everybody says, oh, that's Iowa. That's what they do. So I'm going to be watching that one.
Yeah, it's interesting because looking at their remaining schedules, after Penn State plays at Iowa, at the games at Kinnick Stadium, they still have games at Ohio State, at Maryland, and then home against Michigan and at Michigan State left on their schedule. So I think the path to the college football playoff is easier for Iowa because after playing Penn State this week, the remaining difficult games on their schedule, they play Purdue the following week, and then they have a date with Badgers at Camp Randall. But Wisconsin has kind of lost their footing early on this season. Then Northwestern, Minnesota, Illinois, Nebraska. So I think that if Iowa wins this game, their odds of making the CFP increase drastically.
Yeah, I do think that it seems to be their year. They have a really good team. Their year to get to the college football playoffs, not necessarily their year to win it. I'm still pretty high on Georgia, and I do think that both Georgia and Alabama end up in the college football playoffs. It would be crazy to not have them there at this point, unless something drastic happens. The other college football game that we got to talk about is, let me look at my schedule here and make sure I get this right. Georgia and Auburn. Again, it's not a Georgia podcast, I promise, but we do talk about them a lot. They're really good, so how can you not talk about them? But Georgia, Auburn, Bo Nix played really well. Oh wait, no, he's not Auburn anymore, is he? Shoot.
Yeah, he is.
He is. Okay, I was thinking of. Okay, I thought I ruined that. I looked really stupid, but now I still look really stupid. But he looked really good at Auburn this past week, and Auburn has a pretty solid defense themselves. Another really good SEC team against Georgia. This time around, though, I think they're probably going to lose to Georgia. I expect a similar outcome to the Arkansas game. Perhaps not a shutout. I don't know if I expect that, but as good as I think this Auburn defense is and some of their skill positions are, and as well as Bo Nix played last week, I think it's a different level of SEC team in Georgia. So that's who I have winning that one.
I think this could be a bit of a trap game for Georgia because Auburn's offense is actually better than years past. And the game is at Jordan-Hare, so at Auburn's home field. But I still think that Georgia's going to come out and squeak out a victory on the road.
Yeah. So you think it's going to be closer? I think it might be not so close. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. As far as the NFL goes, like I said, we got a lot of games that are big, and we'd like to get away from the West, which we talked about a lot last week, but it's tough to do that because there's a lot of good games in the West. I think all the games that I have listed here that possibly talk about involve Western teams. But the Bills-Chiefs, that gets one Eastern team in there. That game on Sunday night, I believe, should be wild because this should be a potential AFC championship matchup, if nothing else, a potential playoff matchup between these two teams, two really solid teams. Honestly, I think Buffalo wins it. I think it is that in Kansas City or is that in Buffalo? Do you know that off the top of your head?
Kansas City.
So
it's at Kansas City.
That's a tough one to pull off, but I just think this Buffalo team is rolling right now, and this Chiefs team, for whatever reason, hasn't found that gear that they get into where they just dominate guys. They still have the ability to get there, don't get me wrong, but they just aren't there yet. I think that it'll be a close game, but I think the Buffalo sneaks away with one, which would be multiple times that Kansas City has lost at home already. So that'd be an interesting story to look at.
That's difficult to pick. I've been going back and forth on it. I think that I'm going to pick Kansas City at home by the slimmest of margins. I think it's going to be neck and neck until the fourth quarter, and it feels like that's one of those games that Mahomes gets the ball back and just leads them down the field, and they squeak it out. So I'll go with the Chiefs at home.
Okay. So we'll see how that goes. We don't officially have a pick'em challenge for our podcast. Maybe we'll start one. Who knows? We're just kind of throwing this together as it comes along. So let's see what happens. The last game we're going to talk about, we sort of talked about the Chargers-Browns. I mentioned the Chargers from last week. That's another big game they have coming up. We also have the Niners-Cardinals coming up. But the one that interests me the most, and it might interest you the most, and you can touch on any of these if you wish to, but the Seahawks and Rams. I think that the Rams coming off a loss that many people thought they might have been able to win that one. The Seahawks are playing pretty well right now. They seem to be turning around a little bit. Can they beat the Rams? Can they end up beating the Rams and starting to turn around their ship? I don't know. It'll be a big deciding game for the way that the Seahawks season's going to go here. If they can win this game, that's pretty big for them going forward. If they lose it, it starts to make things look a little bit more dire heading into the mid part of the season. We're getting there. We're still early on, but it's a big game.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the Seahawks need this win a lot more than the Rams do. Obviously, the Seahawks are 2-2, the Rams 3-1 heading into this week. Looking at the Seahawks schedule, after they play the Rams, they have games against Pittsburgh, so that's at Heinz Field. You have a home game against the Saints and a home game against the Jaguars. Then they have their bye week. Packers, Cardinals looming after the bye week. If you look at the Rams schedule, they're 3-1 right now. Their lone loss was to the Cardinals this past week. And then after this game against the Seahawks, they're playing at the Giants, home against the Lions, and at Houston. So I feel like they can make up some more ground if they were to lose this game. But now if the Rams were to win this game, then all of a sudden that division looks like theirs for the taking, them in Arizona. So that could kind of bury the Seahawks early and make it really difficult for Russell Wilson to lead them back to the playoffs. And that would be interesting as far as off-season storylines go, because Ian Rappaport has been tweeting for the last couple of weeks that there's a possibility that Russell Wilson gets moved at the end of the year if things don't go well. So we'll see about that. I think the Seahawks get it done at home. And I think it just adds another, wrench into the NFC West, a competitive division that we highlighted last week, and just a lot of good football.
I think it would be fair to say that the Seahawks come away with a win, but on this one, I'm going to say the Rams win this, because sometimes what is most expected, which people expect the Seahawks start turning it around, I don't think they do. Not at this point. They still have a chance later on in the season to get things straightened up. But I think this Rams team is going to be hungry, angry, and looking for a win here, and against a division opponent who they want to try to knock out early. This could be a big game for the Rams. I think the Rams are going to bounce back and win this game. All right. That is it, I believe. Next week, we'll be looking at the South, the NFC and AFC South in our division deep dive. Thank you for sticking around if you did stick around. Make sure with whatever number of fingers you have that you hit the like button and subscribe so you can keep up with whatever we talk about weekly. And again, thank you for watching. Have a beautiful day.